What is going on, Movie Meals? Movie Meals here for another episode. Remember, this is a Patreon exclusive show, so this will drop on Monday. If you want to watch it exclusive, you got to be here on Mondays, man. You got to drop that dollar in the Patreon. Just go join the patronage, and there you go.
Just
Um,
$1.
you can get some merch at teespring.com/movie meals. Got lots of good stuff. Should have some new holiday stuff coming soon. But let's get into it here. The first thing we're going to talk about in the world of film and television is Lupita Nyong'o in A Quiet Place spinoff. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is reportedly supposed to be about the downfall, like the when they actually invade, right? The aliens, like following somebody at the very beginning of this. We got a little flashback of that in Quiet Place 2, but now we're getting a full story with Lupita, right? Is that correct?
Seems like it. The spinoff is being called A Quiet Place Day 1. So I imagine you're right, Alex, that it's going to be
Ooh.
taking place of the downfall of humanity when the alien creatures first arrive. And it will star Lupita Nyong'o from director Michael Sarnowski, who is the director of Pig with Nicolas Cage, which was a fantastic movie that people should check out and see.
And Alex Wolff. Don't you dare
Sure, sure.
not. He's great in that movie. He's
He is very
great.
good in that movie. He is very
You guys
good.
are so mean to the Naked Brother boys. Anyway, what do you think
You
about
can't
Lupita
complain.
here? What do you think about this?
Yeah, it's awesome. It's Aces. I love this for her. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like I just haven't seen much of her work lately. Like the last time I've heard that she did a project was for, I think it was a Hulu movie called Little Monsters with Josh Gad or something that looked kind of entertaining, but I just was never able to get around to it. But every time that she has been on screen since her amazing debut in 12 Years a Slave, like she's just that actress, that has that movie star appeal to it, to where you are always glued to her. She always has like this great embodiment of charisma. She always brings her A game, whether it's her live action performances or small roles, or small roles in big budget movies like Star Wars when she was that Maz Kanata character. But I'm always loving that she's wanting to, do big projects and not just smaller stuff. Like it just seems like she has a very well-rounded filmography, and this will only add to it. And for someone like me who's not really interested in spin-offs for A Quiet Place, I mean, I was pretty hesitant with a sequel for the movie to begin with and ended up really enjoying it. Um I'm just happy that there's a really good actress attached to a spin-off to get me a little more interested. Now I just need to, see a trailer for this thing whenever they start shooting it and get that all taken care of. But yeah, never hurts to hire talent, and she's one of the best out there.
I think it's funny you brought up Little Monsters. That came out in 2019. She made Us after Little Monsters.
Oh,
Us
okay.
came out also in
Gotcha.
2019. She also was in the 355 was the last real movie she was in, and then she
Oh, I
was
forgot that was a thing. Yeah.
in some Big Mouth stuff right after that. But and then soon to see her again in Wakanda Forever. Is there
Yeah.
supposed to be a
Yeah.
Quiet Place 3?
I imagine one's gonna be made soon. I know Krasinski's directing a new movie, but I forget if there's
Wow,
even a
I gotta
title for it off the top
pull
of my
up
head,
the
but
Internet Movie
he's probably
Database
busy
again.
with that project. Steve Carell's supposed to be in that project too, though, so that would be kind of cool having them work together again. But I can't remember the name of whatever project Krasinski's doing. But I have to imagine Paramount's making sure that they're having as many of these movies as they can. They basically have a new
Life on
franchise
Mars,
now.
is that the movie you're talking about?
Sorry, I'll say that again.
Life on Mars? Or no, you're thinking of Imaginary Friends with Ryan Reynolds, Steve Carell.
Oh, yeah, that must be the one then.
Um, he does not have A Quiet Place 3 on his docket. He's got another movie in development called Life on Mars to direct.
Hmm.
So maybe the studio just wants to take a break from it. I loved the first Quiet Place. I also loved A Quiet Place 2. I think they are both phenomenal.
Hmm.
I think John Krasinski has really shown himself as a great director. I think this is great for Lupita. I think switching and going back to some horror after Us is a great idea. Some horror action. I'm pumped to see her in Wakanda Forever. I think a day one story is great. I think sometimes it doesn't work. We've seen it not work a million times in bad horror spinoffs. We've seen it work sometimes great when you think of like 12 Cloverfield Lane. Netflix tried to show the beginning of Cloverfield and didn't really happen. I think we saw the beginning of Cloverfield in Cloverfield, but they still tried to show the aliens leaving the ship or whatever. So I think this is great. I love the director of Pig being attached. I think Pig is a very interesting character study. And so I think going from a character study and then moving to a little bit more big budget horror is a really great idea. And I think Lapita is awesome. She's a huge talent. So yeah, I love everything about this. But this is a good segue into a broader conversation we were having the other day with some friends. We just watched the horror film Hereditary for our movie club. We're in with a bunch of friends of ours, watch a movie every couple weeks and get together and talk about it. And um, Hereditary is one of my all-time favorite movies. I think it's fantastic. But there was this
Mhm.
very interesting conversation we got into that Kyle and I thought we would continue here about maybe the state of horror and the history of horror. Because we I think we have turned into a bit of horror fans. We used to not be. Used to be terrified little babies, as Kyle might still be, but
Yeah.
I think we've turned our around a little bit. And for me, it was It. Is that the same for you? The new It is what changed it for me.
Mm, it was probably around that time, but I thought there was some others. I can't remember the whole release slate at that time, but that could have been one of them.
I know It for me was when I was like, okay, I'm in on these type of horror films. I'm in. I'm
Mhm.
in on horror. I'm not just in on a Shutter Island style horror. I'm in on this type of jump scare, demon monster horror. The Conjuring followed right after. I absolutely love it. It Follows, I think, has been amazing. That was at that around that time of getting into horror,
Yeah.
and then we backpedaled. And at the end of our college days, we were starting to watch a bunch, and Paranormal Activity. Now I watched The Nightmare on Elm Street for the first time just a couple weeks ago on a plane. Loved it, held up.
Nice.
I know. And so yeah, so we got in this conversation because a lot of the people that have watched this Hereditary had not seen really any horror movie.
Mhm.
So there was an interesting conversation to be had of because some of our friends were like, "This movie is not very scary to me. It wasn't what I was expecting because I went in thinking this was one of, if not the scariest movie ever made," and they were like, so it didn't really get me in that way. And I feel like they went more towards a psychological thriller kind of feel with it. But I'll let you take the reins here, and we can continue this broader conversation. But yeah, take it over from me here.
Oh, well, part of the conversation that was first interesting to me was um them being a little unsuspected of the type of horror that this movie was. And I think it expands out to more general audiences than I ever realized. In that horror genre isn't one type of thing. I think it's common for most audiences now to view horror as jump scare, jump scare in your face, monster slasher type of flair. I don't think that those of the general audiences really realize that there's more, not layers, but more types of sub genre horror that, isn't just suddenly only happening because of A24 films, for example, but has been going on since horror movies first came out. I mean, if you look through, horror and the different um throughout the history, the past couple of or the past few years, you'll see like different time periods have had different types of horror. There's time periods where they had the slasher horror movies. There's time periods where they had the zombie horror movies. But
Oh, the zombie craze in the mid to late 2000s and 2010s was insane.
sure, like
It
that's a
was
perfectly good
insane.
example. I mean, the '70s, had the paranormal possession type of horror movies. But at the same time, though, throughout them all, there's always movies that pop up there more than what they appear to be at face value. Like they have, character driven narratives to them. They have deeper themes to themselves. And I think that's where audiences don't realize that about horror. Like it is, and that's not to say you can't enjoy, the blockbuster jump scare horror movies. That not at all, but I think horror is just one of the more interesting genres to where it can almost be anything as long as it scares you in some type of way. And I think now that we've become better fans of horror, Alex, you and I, is because we've had that excuse me, that realization that it's not just the jump scare type. Like there could be many different ideologies when it comes to the genre.
Yeah, one of the things a friend of ours said during that conversation that I really loved is he said that horror and comedy are probably the most subjective of any genre of film
Mhm,
because it's what scares you and what makes you laugh. I think it's
mhm,
so easy. It goes back all the way I think to the conversation of why comedians are always so good in dramatic roles, and people I think have it backwards where they think it's harder to make people cry than it is to laugh, and it's the opposite. It's much harder to make people laugh than it is to make them cry.
mhm.
And um with horror, I think that is so true. There's so many subgenres of horror that and A24 I think has been the best at doing that for a long time. Why can't I think of the production company that has been rocking it with horror lately with our boy? Why can't I think of it? What's the name of it?
I think you're talking about Blumhouse, aren't you?
I am talking about Bloomhouse. I want to look up Bloomhouse's like production order here for a second because I think that really will help us look at some of the things they've been because I think Bloomhouse is huge for the horror kind of renaissance. Um,
It's part of it, that's for sure. And I think it's because of Blumhouse and 824 that audiences are starting to take notice that there's other types of horror movies, but they're not understanding of how that's possible, if that makes sense. At least that's just me coming from where I'm at and how I view movies. And I think if people really took a second, do a deep dive into horror and go back years and years into the past, like they'll realize that there's different, types of horrors. That's what I mentioned before. But at the end of the day, like if they're like, especially the really good ones, you could see that there's character driven type stories, or there's types of horror movies where it psychologically is affecting you or it's getting under your skin. You're not necessarily, like jumping out of your seat with the popcorn splashing everywhere. Um, and I think people just don't realize that. And, when you come across a horror movie that isn't what you expect, then you're not sure if that's how you should be labeled as scared, or maybe you just haven't realized before that you can be scared in other ways when it comes to movies.
yeah, Bloomhouse. From what I'm looking at here, started. I didn't realize they started with Paranormal Activity. That was kind of their first big production hit. So
Mhm.
Paranormal Activity, I think, is the poster for jump scare. Here we go. I think that's where jump scares really took an effect because I think the horror movies before that were pretty popular. I think like one of the biggest was the Blair Witch, which I just watched for the first time ever a couple weeks ago as well. And the Blair Witch is not jump scare. It's much more, I think, in the vein of a Hereditary when you're kind of labeling this style of horror of more psychological than and Hereditary is definitely I think scarier, but so they come out with Paranormal Activity, then they go to like Insidious Chapter 2, The Purge. Some people think Insidious is one of the scariest movies they've ever seen.
Mhm.
Um, they came out with Whiplash, which again has very horror elements to it, an incredible Oscar-winning movie, but
Elements,
but
yeah.
but it definitely has elements of horror that Blumhouse has been very good at doing.
Mhm.
They
Mhm.
come out with The Gift, great underground horror movie. The
That one's
Visit,
pretty good.
which kind
Yeah.
of brought back M. Night Shyamalan a little bit. With Split and Get Out,
Was
that
that
was
Shyamalan's?
huge. Oh
The
yeah.
Gift was?
Um,
Oh,
yeah.
what am I thinking of?
No, not The Gift. The Visit was M.
Oh,
Night. The
sorry.
Gift
Sorry,
is
I
Joel
misheard you
Edgerton.
then. Yes, yeah.
Both of those though came out at the same year.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and so they had movies like Unfriended, which was a weird Skype movie or something like that it made a ton of money for them.
Yeah.
Happy Death Day was huge for
Horror
Blumhouse
comedy.
with this type of
Yeah.
horror, a horror comedy, and they're making tons of different versions of these horror movies. But I do think with Paranormal Activity, Insidious, I think The Conjuring, it started this bigger trend of jump scare horror. of
Mhm.
us getting shocked of what's around the corner.
Yep.
Conjuring a bit less so, but I think that started a trend, and I think for people of our generation, that's what we are a little more used to is that style of
Mm.
horror. And then a
Sure.
movie like a Hereditary comes around the corner, and it's not that type. I think even something at like Pearl and X more recently that are more horror, they're horror movies, they're a different style with A24, but they also are more, I think, in the vein of what Hereditary does than more jump scare. It's a little bit more gore. You even think of what James Wan does in the early 2000s. He comes out with Conjuring. He comes out with torture porn with the Saw franchise, which there is so much to horror here, and it's a very interesting conversation. What are the thoughts you got?
Well, one other thing I want to point out is that I think because of people noticing, the types of horror movies like the A24s and the more
Blumhouse.
not in your face horror movies,
Oh,
it's
sure.
caused a labeling that I see throughout social media called elevated horror, which
I've never heard of this.
I feel like it's kind of a turn off of a term. Because it feels like by labeling that term, you're making it sound very uppity and prestige when um I don't know. Those types of terminologies just rub me the wrong way, especially nowadays, just because I think people who don't like those movies or tend to, think lesser of those more character driven movies just use that labeling so that way they can make it an excuse to not watch it. But I think especially when it comes to horror, like it's just not the right term. Like horror movies for years and years and years have been very much character driven or very much have had themes or different types of way to scare you. So labeling it um as
Elevated horror.
that just kind of rubs me the wrong way because it's not to me necessarily true at all. It's horror, but there's just different types of it. But you don't need
Yeah.
to label it as that. So that's
So
kind of
I
my
I
only
had
other
never heard
thought I
that
wanted
term
to.
before. So I just Googled it, elevated horror, and I get what you mean,
Mhm.
right? I guess it would be more artsy fartsy horror. You know what I mean? Like that's what it feels
Yeah.
like. And the list of movies that come up immediately: Hereditary, Midsummer, Mother.
Mm.
Mother. It's not a horror movie. Mother's a trash movie, and it's boring as all get out. The Lighthouse, Babadook, The Witch. It follows. Even Raw, which came out a while ago,
Mm.
2016, which is a very good horror movie. And I was scrolling through, and the first thing I see is John Carpenter has no idea what elevated horror means, is one of the first headlines of an article. And John Carpenter's the master of horror. And I
John
think what,
Carpenter knows what he's talking about.
yeah, no, what I think my guess is, and I had not reading that article because it says
Mhm.
John Carpenter has no idea what elevated horror means, is John Carpenter saying, why are we putting these weird labels? It's still horror, is my
Yeah.
guess, is exactly what we're talking about. Because if you look at The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing is one of the scariest movies to this date. I would put
Mhm.
it up against some of those movies that we're talking about. I just watched it in theaters a couple months ago because they were showing it for an anniversary. It is terrifying. And this
Mhm.
elevated horror aspect is very true. I brought this point up in our conversation that I think is really interesting because I think this elevated horror, this artsy fartsy, is just another term for psychological horror because all these movies, um, and It Follows is actually, I think, not in this term. Just looking at what they have here listed. Um, but a lot of these movies are not the okay. There's a demon, a villain, a antagonist. We have to overcome the antagonist in some way.
Mhm.
Midsummer doesn't really have that. Neither does Hereditary. Mother sucks. The Babadook does actually have that in a way, and yet also doesn't. The Witch also has that in a way, and yet doesn't. So I
Mhm.
think It Follows is fighting a monster. It's just a monster in a new and unique, different way of telling that story. Raw, same way. And so I think this elevated horror term is just people who think they're better than everybody in the film community, who make student films to this day still that are just not great, who want to put a label on it because they want to act as if it's superior. Hereditary is one of the greatest movies I've ever seen. I don't know if it's superior than The Exorcist. And The Exorcist is still one of the scariest movies I've ever seen. The
Easily.
Conjuring is one of the scary. I think It Chapter 1 is one of the scariest movies I've ever seen. And they're all four of those movies are drastically different in how they handle their horror. And so I think that putting these labels on it doesn't matter. Does it scare you in some way? Bingo, you're in. That's what
Mhm.
matters. Like I would, one of the things when I watched Hereditary with our buddy, a buddy of ours, that we talked about when we were done is like, okay, it didn't really have jump scare horror. Like there are a couple scenes that have that there, I think, in the very beginning of Hereditary. I guess I thought it was the beginning. Apparently I was corrected. It's a good 45 minutes into the film. But um like that movie makes me uncomfortable the whole time. There are a
Yep.
few moments I'm like, oh, gore and things like that, but I am uncomfortable from start to finish. My heart is
Mhm.
racing from start to finish. The score, everything that involved in that movie does that. Midsummer does that too. I'm uncomfortable. It Follows does that. Guess what else does that? The Exorcist, It, The Conjuring, Insidious for most of it, I think. I think Insidious dates itself a little bit because the demon's been memed so much as Darth Maul, um,
Sure.
but I Paranormal Activity, I watched for the first time a few years ago, and that movie is pretty scary. And I think people forget how scary it is. And they're all different types of horror. And it's a very interesting conversation. And I'm so glad I'm into horror. It's making me want to. They have a horror streaming service that's like just horror movies. I've been thinking about paying that for a month and just binging as many as I can because I
Mhm.
want to get caught up on some of these great horror movies. But then again, it's tough. Halloween goes by, and you're suddenly like, all right, it's time for Charlie Brown Christmas special. It's time for Elf. It's time. It's time. I
Mhm.
hear the jingles. I hear the bells. I gotta wait till next year. But anyway, any more thoughts on this horror, or should we move on?
I just encourage people to expand the boundaries on horror because I think you'll be surprised, like whether it's in different decades that you're watching, or maybe it's current day movies, but they're not the types of movies you would normally
Hmm. Hmm.
expect yourself to watch. Just give it a chance because you might really be surprised by the different types of ways that you'll be getting scared. And then spread the word about those movies because a lot of them are very under the radar, or there are a lot of
Yep.
classics that people should be checking out. So um, glad we got that out of our system. The horror genre has
Yeah.
become a very interesting one for Alex and
One of
myself,
my
and we hope
favorites.
this convo was too.
Yeah, and there's been some really great horror movies this year. I didn't love The Black Phone as much as you, but I really
Mm,
appreciated what it was going for.
sure.
Men, fantastic horror movie. I think Pearl was great. So
Hmm.
there has been some really good horror to check out. But speaking of horror, let's transition to a horrifically run studio in Warner Brothers. These segues, they're so easy. It's not
They're
hard.
dimes.
I know. That's what I made Kyle rearrange the notes and change the order of conversation because I had this
Hmm.
locked and loaded. WB wants to make hairy movies, is what Kyle put in the show notes. And I don't know what that means. Are we putting more hairy people into these movies, Kyle? Please shed some light on this.
I believe what I was writing was Warner Bros. Wants to make more Harry Potter movies,
Oh,
as
big
in the
fan of
Wizard.
him.
Big
I
fan.
saw that headline where they were like, "We haven't made a Harry Potter movie in like 15 years, 20 years, or whatever," and everybody was like, "Didn't you just make 3 of them
What
called the
about Fantastic
Fantastic Beasts?" Yes, seriously. Um, so I'm gonna take the lead on this one. I
Have at it.
think I think this is excellent. I think this is a great decision. As someone who just reread the books, just rewatched all the movies, I am so bummed about Fantastic Beasts because I really like all of the actors they brought in. I think Jude Law as a young Dumbledore is amazing. I loved every 100 actor that played Grindelwald. My favorite being the one that played him in part 2 of the Deathly Hallows as the old man.
Mm,
But they should have just stayed with Colin. It didn't make sense. It was stupid. But they crapped the bed there. I think the best thing they can do is go back to what made Harry Potter work. I think it's something that Star Wars is trying very hard to do. I think it's something that Game of Thrones has just figured out how to do. Bring and we're going to put all of the side stuff about J.K. Rowling aside here, I think. All this, her tweets and everything, let's put that aside. But I
she
think you
might be
bring
involved.
her. No, but that's what I'm saying. I think she does need to be involved, but I think she needs to be involved back at the level she was involved in when she made the original series, not writing, not a
Consulting.
head producer, as a consultant. I think
Mhm.
that is huge because I think we saw such trouble with Star Wars when they completely ignored George. And you don't want to hear your creator of your massive franchise not there. You know what I mean? Like you
Sure.
don't want that. I think the best thing they can do then is what we've been what all these fans who have been like, I've been saying it for a year. I've been saying this since Disney bought Lucasfilm 10 years ago. They need to go 1,000 years, way too many years ahead or way too many years back with no connection. That is what I think Harry Potter needs to do. I would love another. I honestly, what I really love is a show. I would love a 7-season show following a new group of wizards. I would actually, as much as I bleed Gryffindor, I would love for it to take place in Hufflepuff or Ravenclaw, and we just follow somebody going through school. I think you could make it great. I think do 7 seasons for all 7 years, cast young. I think that would be so awesome where we're not fighting a big bad villain. That's what I would really like. But if they're going to go with movies, do the same kind of formula. No big bad. I think we move away from the wizards trying to be, the racist wizards who just hate muggles. I think we need to move away from that. Grindelwald did it. Voldemort did it. We can have a big bad just trying to, what it would be really cool, I think, is going 20 years after the death of Harry. Something like that. And that's as much
Jesus.
connection as we get. No, but seriously, and I think where your protagonist and antagonist meet, maybe it's two wizards who are on the search for the elder one. Something like that where we know where it is, but the characters don't and we get to see that journey or something like that. But what do you think about this?
Well,
Oh, he's got
I
thought.
think it I think it falls in line, or sorry, let me back up. I don't think it's a shock that Warner Bros. CEO Zaslav, old
Zaz
Zazzy
boy.
boy, is making these comments. I just based on him going that we want to focus on franchises and we want to go back to focusing on movies for theaters mainly. One of their biggest properties has been Harry Potter, and that's one of been their best theatrical successes. So naturally, the business decision for him would be, oh, let's go back to that. And I mean, granted, they do have Fantastic Beasts. That's technically part of it. I don't know if that means that they're gonna keep moving forward with those movies, or if they see the writing on the wall and they're just gonna stop what they're doing and refocus their efforts on a different part of Harry Potter Hogwarts land. But I don't know. I mean, you know me. I would just much rather focus on finding that new franchise or creating something new and hope that it becomes a franchise rather than going back to the well. But I can't deny that there could be possibilities for making these movies worthwhile, that these could be something special in the world of Harry Potter for other generations. But I think some of the ideas that you were having were pretty solid ones, and those wouldn't be ideas I'd be against, but um I don't know. I could just see the headlines of those actors getting the bags to come back into the role similar to, The Force Awakens or something, and we have that type of movie. I wouldn't be shocked at all if that's the route that they would go with. And that's not the route I would want to happen, but I just see that headline, you know what I mean? So,
I
I'm
actually
not
don't. I
really.
don't see the headline. I don't see like the everyone. I could see some, but like when I think of the
Sure.
anniversary and how Emma Watson was like, I wanted to quit. She didn't want to do it anymore. She was like, this is
Mhm.
hard. It's hard to be in the limelight. She hasn't been in a movie in years. She's been just enjoying her life.
Yeah.
Rupert Grint is going to be in a new M Night Shyamalan movie, and he's been on a couple TV shows, but even he took a break.
Mhm.
I'm going to do everything in my power to watch Daniel Radcliffe as Weird Al Yankovic. I think they all want a break from Harry Potter. So I don't know if I would see them
Forever.
back. We've lost some of those great actors.
Yeah.
I don't want to see like a Dumbledore. I mean, Dumbledore in the series is dead. I don't want to see some sort of resurrection. I don't want to see any of that myself. I think going ahead 20 years, I think starting, could you imagine if the first movie is starting Harry Potter is dead? Like that's the news. Harry Potter, the boy who lived, has passed away. And now
Yeah.
I think that would be excellent. We used to talk about that with Star Wars. Obviously, RIP to Carrie Fisher and her incredible career, and I love her so much. And but that was a conversation we had after she passed away. Is Star Wars going to start at at her funeral?
Mhm.
And I think that was a mistake that they didn't, because I think it would have been a very powerful way to start a film. And I think a new Harry Potter franchise starting with Harry is done would be incredible. And the man to direct that movie is Ryan Johnson. He knows how to kill the past. Um,
To
but
some, he knows how to kill a franchise, so
I also am very curious, well, to the few. Um,
Yeah, I know,
I'm
I know.
very, very curious, if they would stick to that formula of only British directors outside of obviously Alfonso, but that was a huge thing they wanted. And there's some great British directors that I would love to see take the mantle, but there are a couple that would be like, man, like a Ryan Johnson Harry Potter would be awesome, I think. I think it'd be really cool, don't you think?
Sure.
Like could you imagine if James Gunn had done Fantastic Beasts, what actually fun that movie might have been with the beasts and the designs and everything? Like there I don't know if they'll do that. There's plenty of great talent, obviously, over in Britain, but
Mhm.
um, it'd be cool to see a Daisy Ridley pop up as a new wizard. Get some of those big actors. Go get those big names. What? Why are you laughing at me?
Morph Star Wars into Harry Potter, that's all.
I'm just trying to think
Let's
of
make it
actors that
happen.
haven't already been in this franchise that would be great, and we haven't seen a
Sure.
Daisy Ridley in a long time. Um,
John Boyega.
John
Does he want a
Boyega would
wand?
be great. Be
Yeah.
great. You all want a wand. We all do. But any
Sure.
other thoughts?
Not really. I think this is one of those things where we just have to wait and see what becomes of this, if this even happens.
I think it
Which
will.
I
I
think
think we
it
will get a Harry Potter movie.
I don't think this is gonna get scrapped or not happen at all. There's gonna be it's gonna be inevitable that a new one comes around. I won't be really looking forward to it, but you know, just wanted to discuss about it because it was kind of shocking in a way.
Yeah, I think it would be great, man, to have Harry Potter back. They've got the new game coming out in I believe February, a Harry Potter Legacy, and it looks incredible. Open world, you get to be a wizard, go through the Hogwarts, go on these missions, play Quidditch. It looks amazing. That game's going to be huge. I think maybe when that game comes out, maybe in a few months, we're going to hear some news
Hmm,
about movies. But anyway, let's get to the
sure.
last story of the day. Uh, Daphne Keene wants to or has joined Acolyte, the Star
Mhm.
Wars show. What do you think about this as the Star Wars man?
Kyle, you know everything there is about Star Wars.
Yep.
Can you refresh my memory on what Acolyte is supposed to be about? I'm forgetting what the show premise is.
Um, it is supposed to, if I remember correctly, be taking place in the High Republic. I just pulled it
So
up
long
too
ago,
because
right?
I need a fresher itself. So this says Acolyte is an upcoming American television series created by whoever for a streaming service Disney Plus. It is part of the Star Wars franchise and set at the end of the High Republic era before the events of the main Star Wars films. So yes, it will take place. Um, I believe before episode one. It's supposed to follow some of the new books that have been coming out about Jedi that have been going on missions and new characters and everything. And they've casted a few actors. Daphne Keene would be, I think, the biggest name of anybody I've heard. But what do you think
Mm,
about this?
I don't know. I mean, they got Jodie Turner Smith and Amanda Stenberg. Yeah, they kind of have a good cast rounding out here by the looks of it. I do like the idea of this show kind of going back that far. But I just need to know a little bit more, only because I'm not closely tied to the Star Wars lore. But at least
Well,
by
that and
that
they're not
initial
announcing.
premise, at least it's kind of cool sounding. And Daphne Keene, I've liked her in Logan. Unfortunately, I just haven't seen much of her other works. I know Alex, are a big fan of His
She was
Darkest Material,
great.
and
Yep.
I'm sure that she's great in that show. But it's cool that she's getting these opportunities and getting more roles to where possibly she can be able to get the bag and be able to do other types of projects, get her uh picking that can make her an even bigger star. So I'm very curious on what character or what type of character, if it's like a Sith person or a
My guess is
Jedi or
she's a
something.
Padawan. My
A
guess is
Padawan,
Daphne
yeah.
Keene will be a Padawan to one of the other ladies that was cast, and we'll be following these couple of badass women doing some awesome stuff in the Star Wars world before the fall of the Jedi Order. And man, that show,
Whee!
you know how it ends, right? It's gonna end at Order 66. Does one of them get away? Does one of them die? That'd be cool, man. Man, the Star Wars, there, man, Andor really brought me back. It really did. Andor has ignited a bit of the magic that Star Wars has desperately missed. Mandalorian has had it, but Mandalorian, some people have not liked. I think Obi-Wan, some people didn't like. I think overall Obi-Wan was received pretty well. Boba Fett, not. Um, but and I think Ahsoka will be good. But this Andor has been so good that I think Acolyte is it's got me thinking more positively about Star Wars. I think she's a great choice. Haven't seen her since his Dark Materials. I'm guessing she's working on the latest season. She's wonderful in it. She's obviously incredible in Logan. She's got a smallish resume, but HBO's big projects are huge. She's been working with HBO for the last 2 years,
Mhm.
last handful of years on this show,
Yeah.
so it makes sense. They like to keep people in house. Um, yeah, I'm loving everything about this, man. Acolyte's gonna be good. I hope.
Yeah, it just what really is gonna make or break the show if I'm getting vibes of Andor or if I'm getting vibes of the opposite end of the spectrum like Boba Fett. And I mean that in terms of production value, not in tone. Because both of
Sure.
those shows' tones, whether they're good or bad, are still solid. It's just about how you execute the story itself. And I hope that Acolyte becomes another stepping stone in going towards better storytelling and really delivering on production value, similar to what Andor has done, rather than what we've seen from the latter, like Boba Fett or to a degree Obi-Wan. So I just need to see something from this show, man, to really know like of the story and
I forgot they also cast they also cast Lee
that's fine.
Jong-jae, I believe is how you say it, the main guy from Squid Game. I forgot they added him, and he is
Hmm.
phenomenal in Squid Game. I love
Hmm.
the cast. It's written by the writer of, like Russian Doll, the TV show that was pretty popular.
Oh.
That's kind of the biggest thing I've seen so far. It looks like a lot of television work, but
Hmm.
I mean, she looks great. She's young. This writer, they don't have anybody cast or down to direct, but with all the women they're adding and the talent from across the board, it tells me we're going to get a really powerful show about some strong women, and I'm here for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure seems like it.
I'm
Why
here
not?
for it. Anything else?
No. No. I think that's about a wrap.
All right, guys. What did you think of today's episode? Comment below. Let us know. Remember to like, subscribe, share. Go check out the merch. Thanks to the patrons. Go join the Patreon. Shorter episode today. Nothing wrong with that. And as always, thank you for watching, Mom.
See you guys.
How do I stop?